Before we begin, I'd just like to thank the new paid supporters to the show. On Spotify, I'd like to thank Annalise, Lindsay, Jonathan, and Aaron. Welcome on board. And over on Substack, I'd also like to thank Sophie. I'd like to thank Lucia Williams. And I'd really like to thank Keir Kirby. Keir Kirby is the lady who sang the song Groove is in the Heart. She left a message, Doc Malik, to hear voices of truth sharing ideas is surely one of the best examples you could set to uplift, inspire and motivate us. Thank you. I think of you and smile. Groove is in your heart. Keir Kirby from D Light. Wow. That's a lovely message to receive. And lastly, I'd like to thank Wendy Webb. Thanks for all of you who've subscribed. I'm sorry if I've missed any names. I know times are tough and, everything adds up. Inflation is rampant and it's not easy. There's so many people to support out there. So those of you who've stuck with me from the beginning and, believe in this show and believe in what I'm doing, I'd just like to say thank you very much. All right, folks, enjoy the show. Before we begin, I want to quickly explain a small but important change to how this podcast works. Up until now, many of you will know that 1 in 3 episodes sat behind a paywall. I'm moving away from that model. From now on, the first half of every main podcast episode will be free for everyone. These conversations remain open and accessible, and that's important to me. For those who choose to support the show, the second half of each episode will be reserved for paid supporters. This is where the conversation often deepens, and it now includes a live interactive segment where supporters can ask questions of my guests and of me. If you value this work and want access to the full conversation, the ability to ask questions, and to join our private Telegram community, please consider becoming a supporter. Your support keeps this podcast independent, uncaptured, and alive, and sponsor and ad-free. Thanks for being here. Now, let's get into this conversation.
You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
No, I mean it. Thank you so much. But listen, this is really weird what I'm going to tell you now, right? So 99% of the people that come and see me look older than their photo.
Okay.
All right. You look younger than your photo.
Yeah.
You're an exception. I think you need to update your ex profile picture.
I'm going to do it, yeah.
Maybe the photo I take of you today, you can use that.
Yeah. Elon Musk might send my data to Israel before I can do it.
Okay, maybe you want to stay underground and just keep...
I'm out there.
All right, okay. So I watched a video of yours recently about Venezuela. It's very good, by the way. I liked it. I liked it a lot because, yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are like, "Oh, MAGA, ooh, yeah, America, let's go." And you're just like, how much of this is just complete bot garbage, CIA, some guy in some CIA lab typing away, or how much of this is real? And I think it's a bit of both, actually. I think, unfortunately, I've realized in this world there's a lot of really stupid people, and they just go with whatever. But you were breaking down the nuance of everything, and the reality is it's never binary, and there's lots of gray zones, and there can be multiple truths at the same time. And I one of the things I find a lot in social media is like, oh, so you don't like this? Does that mean you support this? And it's like, it's this or that. And it's never that simple. And, you broke it down really well in that YouTube video that you did. And we'll come to that in a second. But I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin Buster.
Yeah.
All right. So you're a former banker.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't like bankers very much, but
Nor do I.
you seem like a nice guy, and the fact that you're former sounds like a good thing. you woke up to what was going on, and then you got into Bitcoin, and you're probably, I don't know, but probably a Bitcoin millionaire or whatever. It's done, good for you. And then by default, you're going to be captured into that ideology because it's done well for you, and you made a name for yourself. You're at the first Bitcoin conference, and you're saying all these wonderful things about Bitcoin. You kind of have to keep saying nice things about Bitcoin. And where I'm coming from is I was very skeptical at the beginning. Then I kind of got bought in. I had Sefadina Moose on, you know, the guy who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, and had Efrat Fenixen. She's all about Bitcoin, a few other people. And I was like, wow, Bitcoin's amazing. Then I looked into it a little bit more, and I've got a theory, and then I'm going to shut up and I want to hear what you think. So this thing comes out of nowhere. There's a white paper by some NSA people, and they come out with this cryptocurrency thing, blockchain. A bunch of tech geeks and nerds, maybe you included, got into it very early. Slowly it got a little bit popularized. It got kind of like publicly shamed by the authorities, so everybody then got curious, what is this thing? And now it's kind of really getting bought in by a lot of people. People know about Coinbase. Even your granny's got a little bit of crypto. Maybe it was always designed to be like that. Because maybe if the government said, we're going to introduce a digital currency, we're going to make money out of nothing, and it's going to be programmable, everybody would have been shut up and, you know, STFU. It's not going to happen. But if you do it in a way that, you know, I don't know if you've heard of something called a cool curve, which is on a graph, you know, bell-shaped curve, right at the far end, the leading edge. You don't want to be too far out because people just think you're not cool. You're just weird. But if you're just ahead of the herd, that's cool. You're in the cool curve. And then eventually that cool will be adopted by the main group of people, and then it'll go back down. And maybe that's what they did. They wanted it seeded, and they knew they were going to be running out of the fiat Ponzi scheme. They needed an alternative, and the alternative was very radical. So let's seed it slowly into society, get early adopters, make it a little bit fringe, then make it a bit like curiosity, then make it more generally acceptable. And now everybody knows about blockchain, everybody knows about crypto, everybody knows about CBDCs. And Bitcoin, it's not private. You can see every transaction. There's no privacy there at all. There's not much anonymity either. All the places where you have to sell and buy it, you have to verify your data, your ID. If technology goes down, I mean, it's useless. You can't use it anymore. Well, I'm not a fan of crypto. I just feel like cash is anonymous. Gold and silver have always had real value. What is this crypto business and tokenizations and blockchains? Do you not think we've all been sold a crock of, you know? Over to you.
Okay. All right. Where do I start on that? So let's jump into, you have to separate the word Bitcoin. Then you have to separate the word Bitcoin in self-custody from Bitcoin in custody. So you either hold your Bitcoin with a Wall Street bank, exchange, institution, and they give you a promise that you have your Bitcoin, or you own Bitcoin in self-custody. Take away the word crypto and you get rid of 99, you've got, that's all a scam. That's all a venture capital, fiat money printing, way of trying to steal your Bitcoin and turn the nation into a nation of degenerate gamblers under a centralized control by somebody that can program a bunch of money. So once you got rid of all of that, you're down to Bitcoin in self-custody, which is Bitcoin, money you can own, money you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply. It does those three things. You can own it outside the system. You can spend it without permission, but there will be a traceable record, which you can obfuscate. And nobody controls the money supply. That's the three things that Bitcoin does. Now, if you own it in custody, you then introduce counterparty risk, and you're just making someone else rich, and you haven't got the freedom that it promises you. If you convert it for some other type of shitcoin, then you've got a crypto scam that was created by somebody. It does a few things. Now, you said cash, gold, Bitcoin. Cash is awesome for privacy and transactions within national borders and in a face-to-face community manner. There is no better technology than cash for local spending. The biggest problem with it doesn't scale, because if you put a bag of cash and you've got millions and millions of dollars, it's going to be worth significantly less at the end of the year. And my father did exactly that. He didn't trust the system. and he put everything in cash. And by the time he passed away, that cash was worth nothing, but it was virtually everything to him at one stage in his life. Then you have gold. The problem with gold is that most people at scale cannot store gold, so they end up giving it to somebody else, and they end up with a paper receipt for gold. Or they hold it in custody with a very reputable custodian. They put it in Singapore, they put it in Switzerland, and when COVID comes, they can't get their gold because they issue additional paper receipts for gold that didn't exist, which created the banking system in the first place. However, if you can custody gold, or you are an elite that owns the custodian, then gold is the most awesome way of preserving your wealth over time and beating the fact that inflation is eat away your cash.
Basically what you're saying, if it's not in your possession, it's not yours.
If it's not possession, it's not yours. And when it is somebody else's, they leverage it, they turn it into a collateralized debt obligation, they issue you an IOU, and they use it for evil, like funding wars in Venezuela.
Even our money in the bank is like that now.
Exactly. So money in a bank is the worst. Like it's the worst of everything.
Well, that's all right. I don't have much money in the bank.
Exactly. I mean,
yeah, because I don't have much money.
That was created by a bank, out of thin air. They issued you a promise, and it's backed by debt. So the only way you can create a bank account balance is by borrowing it, or you receive it from somebody and somebody else borrowed it. So that is the backbone of the entire debt-backed system that fuels all the wars and causes all the problems in the world. Bank accounts are Ponzi schemes.
Yep.
There's not enough when you borrow money into existence, it incurs an interest on top. Now imagine the first ever loan in the world. You said, in order to create £1,000, you have to borrow £1,000. How do I do that? I'll lend you £1,000. I'll go buy a house for you. I'll let you live in it. I'll give you a paper contract that says, if you don't, repay per this schedule, the house is mine. In the meantime, you can think it's yours until you paid me back. And you will need to pay double the value over time, and you will need to pay X amount of interest on this schedule. Where's the money to repay the interest? All right, that money doesn't exist. So I've got to go persuade somebody else to borrow the money into existence. You find as many people as you can, as many companies as you can, and the ultimate is just get the government to borrow it. And if they can borrow it, then just send them into war, borrow it, and now the money to pay the interest exists because somebody else borrowed it into existence. And so now you have to ever increase debt forever until the system breaks, and therefore you have a crisis in that country, and then you find a new currency to do the same thing. That is the British Empire and the American Empire since the formation of the Bank of England, and that's the problem with what we're experiencing today. So that's a bank account. So a bank account is a Ponzi scheme. Cash inflates away where you lose value and you can't store value, but you have great spending technology and privacy technology. Gold preserves your wealth as a store of value, but try going to the shop and, shaving off a bit of gold, and verifying that it's real, and auditing that when you have it in Singapore, you actually have it in Singapore.
I've learned all these words now, like liquidity. So it's not liquid. Like, it's great at storing wealth, but liquid is something like, how quickly can you use it? How quickly can you just go out to the shops and buy a loaf of bread? You can't do that.
Yeah, that's spendability. So, median, they call it a median of exchange. Yeah. Liquidity is your ability to convert it into cash.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
No worries. And so then you're left with Bitcoin. Well, what does Bitcoin do? And by the way, I'm a big fan of cash and gold. You meet Bitcoiners that will say how Bitcoin is everything.
Yeah.
There is a technology that serves a purpose. Gold has preserved and stored value for 5,000 years. And if you're incredibly wealthy and you have the ability to self-custody it, and you have a massive security system, and you have an infrastructure to service that, then gold is awesome. But you're still going to need some cash. And if you want to make international payments, you're now in the banking system. So how do you exit the banking system and make international payments at scale that can be audited, where you can take your value, and when your country becomes oppressive, and tries to implement a wealth tax or tries to implement an exit tax, and you decide, I don't want to be a part of what this country is doing, then the only value you can take with you on a plane at scale is Bitcoin. It's the only thing where you can take it, you can own it, you can spend it, and you know the supply of it is never going to change. So it takes some of the properties of gold, but created a digital version. So now you've made a digital version. What's the downside of a digital version? Well, the downside of a digital version is that there is an infrastructure that needs to be maintained. So it created the world's largest distributed supercomputer that exists globally, and anyone can contribute some computer power to that network. You can also verify your own transactions, and anybody that wants to open a wallet anywhere in the world, they can open a wallet, and you can send it to anybody. Now, when you send it, if you want to buy it on an exchange, then you're in the fiat currency rails. You are taking your fiat currency and you're converting it to Bitcoin, which has all the rules of fiat currency, which is KYC and know your customer and all of that type of stuff. So there is the on-ramps and off-ramps are subject to all the rules of control of a fiat currency. Once you're in it, you can take it off the exchange, you can hold it in self-custody, and you can use a unique wallet address every time you make a transaction, and you can do something called a coin join, which obfuscates the transaction.
So hold on a second. Slow down. I need to slow down a bit. So when you say your own unique wallet, like what do you mean every single time you use it?
So people think of Bitcoin as a bank account in order to try and conceptualize it. Think of Bitcoin as value that you can store, and you are able to access that just by remembering 12 to 24 words or having access to a complex encrypted password key that you need to store. Your skill is to be able to store that and not have a hacker find it. Once you know how to do that, which specialist devices exist to do that, like a specialist device not connected to the internet, there's a little USB key.
Like Trezor.
Like Trezor, yeah. Then you are able to access that Bitcoin, and every time you send it, it will take and create a unique wallet address in order to send that transaction. And so you can have a unique wallet address because every time you send a transaction, it's published on the blockchain, which is what allows us to have no bank and no central bank. Because everyone can verify every transaction, and I don't want to get too geeky. It's verified by miners, and and people can run their own nodes in order to do that. The complexity of it is the bit that I don't think is worth getting into. But the point is that once you have it in a wallet, you can send that where only that transaction is traceable, and then you're sending it from your own wallet, which requires no KYC and no identity, so it's pseudonymous. Now, if somebody's running software like you bought it on Coinbase Exchange, and Coinbase is subpoenaed by the government, then they have all, and they give all the data to the government. Then the government will have that data that this person that provided this ID bought this Bitcoin and withdrew it to this address. But once it's in that address, you can send it outside the system. You can do whatever you want to do with it.
But that's what I find really annoying, that you have to go to these exchanges and they want all your information. How can you buy Bitcoin without these exchanges?
Well, how can you buy gold without those exchanges? You can't. You can't buy it. This is a financial asset. Now, if you want to go and meet somebody and give them a suitcase of cash and buy some Bitcoin, you're risking your life in that transaction. And so that's just as problematic. Now, is there vast criminal networks that do this? Absolutely, there are vast criminal networks and can do that. But they can use a bank account anyway. You just have a relationship with Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan, be strategically significant to the system, maybe engage in pedophilia so you're compromised, and then you can money launder or whatever you want in a Jeffrey Epstein network. But if you want to do it, this way. So the point of this is that, as with everything, there's nuance and pros and cons. But you need to find me anything else where you can own it, you can spend it globally to anybody that wants to set up a wallet, and you can guarantee that the supply of it will never ever change.
So
it's got a fixed supply.
When you spend it, you can spend it, and with your little wee Trezor, you can send it directly to someone else's wallet.
Correct.
So you don't need that intermediary. You don't need that Coinbase exchange or anything like that.
No, and this is the PSYOP. The PSYOP is making you think that you need Coinbase in order to own your Bitcoin. No, you need Coinbase to buy Bitcoin. And Coinbase is just one exchange. There's many of them.
Are there any other good ones out there?
You can, if you want to get pretty geeky, you can do a decentralized exchange and a peer-to-peer network of interconnected bank accounts where you can buy without KYC peer-to-peer.
What?
Yeah. Hodl is an example of an exchange like that.
So which one?
Hodl. HODL.
HODL. Okay, right. Never heard of any of these things.
Yeah, they don't want you to know about any of these things. So all this to say is, if you need your value to come with you wherever you go at scale, and this is the way I always like to think about this. Bitcoin, there is only ever going to be 21 million. 20 million of them in mined already. There's only another million to go in the next 100 years, beyond our lifetime. Next generation, 2140, they'll all be mined. And when people own Bitcoin, they should think about it as an intergenerational savings account, that one day each Bitcoin may be worth $10 million per Bitcoin. So when you think about it that way, and I'm not saying that that's not financial advice, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but when you think about it that way, you learn, you know that value can go with you wherever you want in the world. And it requires no infrastructure, no counterparty, and nobody in the middle to maintain that infrastructure. So if one day you're saving your Bitcoin, you're owning more every single month, and historically that has beaten every stock market, every real estate market, every financial product that exists in the world. If they do that, you buy a bit more every month for 4 years. Every single person that's done that has outperformed every money manager, everyone in the world. Okay. Yeah. Then you get to take that anywhere. And I didn't realize this was going to be a bit of
No, it's all right.
A pitch for Bitcoin. But Bitcoin does have its limitations. And so
what are the limitations?
Well, what are the limitations? You thought that you could only buy it via Coinbase. And so there is a very deliberate operation to centralize as much Bitcoin as possible. And there are weaknesses. And I personally believe, because I was around very early in Bitcoin when it was about $3 in 2011.
Wow.
And invested in over 100 different companies that became, including Coinbase and many, many of the other exchanges at the time, to bootstrap this industry that no one would invest in. There is a very, I personally believe it did come from intelligence.
You do think it did?
I do. And I'm honest about that. So then we asked the question, who created it? Why did they create it? And what was the game?
Yeah.
So I personally believe it was, it came from DigiCash, which was the previous attempts at creating a digital currency. It was shut down. It was created, that network, DigiCash, was from David Chom. David Chom had connections to Myalansky and various criminal networks.
Dodgy people.
Yeah.
If people don't know that, we're talking about the mafia, money men.
Yep. And David Chom was taken out because it had centralized problems. And when you're taken out, you can be co-opted into operations. So suddenly, through that network, a guy called Len Sassaman, who I believe is one of the people that they call Satoshi Nakamoto today, and Hal Finney, that did one of the early transactions, both are dead today. They were taken out. Sorry.
When you say taken out, like, did they die naturally on suspicious circumstances? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yes, they both died naturally. and they both had connections to meetings with intelligence networks throughout in their life.
So why'd you say they were taken out? People do die.
I don't think I should say that. Let me take that back.
Okay.
They could have been taken out. There is suspicious circumstance. I don't have an opinion on either way. But naturally, you know, they passed away. And there's a couple of theories of, firstly, what actually happened. The first thing that happened is that it took the problems with DigiCash and created a decentralized network. And that was when we had the invention of mining and a decentralized supercomputer where anyone could provide the infrastructure. It then also had and the most important thing is the code was open sourced. Now, when the code was open sourced, it meant that anyone could read the code, anyone could run the code, and anyone could propose an improvement to the code. And if you want to back up a copy of the blockchain, then you can run the node. So you've got these three things: mining, open source code, and nodes. Think of like the US, you have the Senate, the Congress, the judicial, right? If you want to compromise Bitcoin, you have to get all of the miners, all of the nodes, and all of the developers. And then you have to get all of the users that could potentially fork this off and react to the network being compromised. So with that structure, we created them, you know, it was the most, and it still is today, the most decentralized thing that exists today, that is the hardest to co-opt. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't do that. So once you had that structure, the most important thing was the code became open source. Now, was it created with innovation that came from intelligence? Absolutely. Like cryptographic, SHA-256. These were all open source libraries that were created from NSA. And most of the innovation, in fact, every technological innovation, every technology we use today was normally created for killing people first. And then it was privatized. And then you suddenly come up with these companies like Apple, Google, and Tesla. But it was all the innovation was originally invented by government for killing people.
Like the internet.
Exactly. Like the internet, like GPS, like the personal computer. Everything that you see as a rock star in a garage that created a business. No, that was originally created by the government, by intelligence. And then privatized and handed over to an entrepreneur with a clown story of how they're the greatest in the world.
I've talked about this so many times. I've talked about Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, Bezos. These are made men. Mm-hmm. These were not people who are just geniuses. Even Elon Musk, that, you know, are super. I mean, they might be intelligent, but they're not the Tony Starks. They are people who are made men who have got intelligence, money seeded to them, lots of people behind them creating a technology or business or whatever, and then they're the front men, and they're given a lot of money to play the playboy and to give legitimacy to it and to keep the cover story going.
And most importantly, there are two weapons that are fired at them. One is they need access to capital, which means they become subordinate to what I call the financial industrial complex. And if you want access to that capital, the higher you go, the more capital you get, the more compromised you have to be. And that's what, we'll get into that later if we want, but that's what these Epstein networks were.
Yeah, let's talk about that later, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that.
These are highly sophisticated operations of compromise so that you do not default on the power structure. But anyway.
No, just quickly coming to that. I heard this podcast with Nick Griffin with my friend James Delingpole, and Nick was talking about how people had approached him, some rabbis from America, to, you know, to work with the British National Party, and they came with money, and they came with checks, and they said, we want you to stop talking about Israel and Zionism. We want you to just focus on Islam and Islamophobia.
Correct.
And he said no.
Yeah.
And then there's someone else. He was talking about how some other guy came along and offered one of the people he knew £300,000, and it was like, stop talking about trans agenda and stuff like that. It was really, or abortion. Don't talk about abortion. And then there's someone else again came with a check, some rabbi about something else, and don't talk about immigration. And what Nick then said was, they don't actually care about what the topic is. They're giving the check with a condition to see if they can buy your soul. Because if you will say, yes, I'm not going to talk about this, that means you're bought and you're compromised. And that's what it's always about.
And you're allowed to get the traffic you need to make your podcast successful. So the more the algorithm works for you, the more you have to compromise. So if you're at the Alex Jones level, you know, at the Joe Rogan level, there are rules to operate at that level.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I can tell you what those rules are, by the way, very quickly.
Go for it.
So basically, I'll give an example. The moment I started talking about Trump and saying he's not our savior, man, I lose a lot of followers and subscribers. The moment I said this war, this abduction of Venezuelans leader is wrong, and you know what, this is a criminal act, again, massive loss of like followers and subscribers. And because like you're not allowed to do that, it's not cool. But you know what the real thing is that you can't talk about, and it's not questioning the genocide in Gaza, it's not anti-Semitism, it's not that. You cannot touch certain things, such as exposing the fact that you cannot vote out of tyranny, that democracy is an illusion and everything's a uniparty system. You have to go along with the idea that the next political savior is our hero and our way out. Whether it's Trump, whether it's Farage, whether it's Rupert Lowe, you need to keep everybody at the casino table gambling away. Just vote harder, vote better, and next time you'll hit the jackpot. They need you in the system. And if you say the opposite, if you say to people, actually, you know what, voting's not the answer and the political system's completely corrupt and this is how they keep, what we need to do is just walk away, you get punished by the system. So that's number one. And two, if you talk about the banking system, if you talk about the Bank of International Settlements, and you talk about how pretty much every human problem that exists today in the world is because of the banking money system.
Yeah.
That doesn't go down well.
Okay, well, that's what I've been doing for 25 years. And so, you know, it's, I think if you're exposing the real nature of power, even things people think like there was a time when you couldn't talk about, you know, Nazi propaganda and Jew hatred and Jews rule the world and stuff like that. You're allowed to talk about that now. You will also suffer in certain corners of the internet massive censorship to make you believe that Jews do rule the world. But there will be other corners of the internet where you can go on X Spaces and you can go and join a 24/7 space that is dedicated to saying how every single problem in the world is a Jewish conspiracy. You can also go to another space at the same time where there'll be a bunch of people that will tell you how every single problem is a terrorist, Islamophobic, Qatar-funded problem. And both of those exist. And depending on how much time you spend there, your algorithm will adjust in order to radicalize you into the corner of the internet they want you to be.
Yeah.
And so we are being compartmentalized, and we'll get back to where we were with Bitcoin in the beginning, but we are being compartmentalized because the strategy of power has always been divide and conquer.
Absolutely.
And obfuscate real power. Put a politician there, and he's a battering ram for what he's just creating an acceptable narrative for what he was paid to do by the lobby. And if he doesn't do what he was paid to do by the lobby, it escalates up the power cycle. You know, suddenly you're a pedophile or something, or suddenly a bit of Jeffrey Epstein emails get leaked, but not everything, just a little bit of details, just to push you back on track to what you're meant to be doing. And so even the release of the files is still the same blackmail operation that's being weaponized right now, because the real truth isn't going to come out. You know, it's just they're just weaponizing the release and what are they doing? They're making you spend all of your time talking about every different angle of every different thing, and it becomes a Jerry Springer show. So it's the same trap or that they created, you know, the distraction campaigns and sports and everything in the first place, because they want you debating that. And they will put you in a corner of the internet. and they will create a new tool. And at the moment, the new tool is freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach.
Absolutely.
Say exactly what you think, because we're building your AI algorithm and your social credit score. And we will be deciding what to do with you later, but we need you to speak what you actually think. That's the new tool. It's not censorship. It's not oppression of speech. It's data, because that's the new agenda. Which brings us nicely back to like the Bitcoin side. So why would intelligence create it? So firstly, the key thing is that they open sourced it, which meant that at that moment, the project can be utilized by anyone that wants to self-custody. A bit like when the British Empire created all these islands, they wanted those islands to exist as tax havens, so that they can escape when they want to escape. And they don't make it where they don't exist. There is ways of not paying tax and all these different things because they want it. But the vast majority, they don't make it accessible. So just like that with Bitcoin, for the vast majority, they want you in custody. They want you to borrow against your Bitcoin. They want you to give it to Coinbase, who's a public company. And now a public company is owned by the financial industrial complex. So they create as many ways for you to not own your Bitcoin, but they want Bitcoin in self-custody because it's their escape valve, just like gold, islands, and Bitcoin in self-custody and some cash. Those will all exist, but it will not be accessible for the masses, or it still is accessible on the fringe, but most people would just choose the convenience. And so they still want all those things to exist because they want to use them, which is a great thing. So with Bitcoin, you had the same thing. You have Bitcoin in self-custody. You can still use all these things, but most people don't even know, and won't go to that level of sophistication. And so they end up just giving it to the financial industrial complex, who then use it to leverage and do the things that they do, which is make money off volatility.
But go back to, why did they open source it and why did they make it?
Yeah, so I actually think it was a genuine resistance within an intelligence network to create a tool that they want to use, but with a PSYOP embedded in it. So once you get to...
Explain that to me. I didn't get that.
Well, so they created a tool that they want to use, which is the ability to own your own money and escape, to send your own money, and to have a monetary policy that will never change, so it's resistant to anything a central banker does. So that's what Bitcoin does. You can own your money without a bank, you can spend it without government permission, and the monetary policy is not set by a central bank. There'll only ever be 21 million, it's a fixed supply. It's digital gold, but more scarce. So that means that when you print money, fixed assets go up. That's why gold preserved its value for 5,000 years, because gold is the only asset where for 5,000 years on average, they only found 2% on average per month. You had gold rushes where they found massive chunks, but on average, it grew at 2% per month.
I think the example, for example, I read or somewhere was that if you looked at gold where it was 100 years ago and where it is now, it's preserved wealth. So, for example, the dollar and the pound have just devalued. So, whereas before 100 years ago, it might have been £100 that would have bought you an ounce of gold. Now they're saying it's £3,000. But actually, if you look at the real value of gold with the debasement of the pound and dollar, it should be like £50,000. It should be like an ounce.
Yeah.
Like that's the money supply, and it's deliberately being suppressed. So even now when people say, oh my God, the gold is going up so much. No, it's only going up a tiny amount. If it really went up where it's meant to be, it would expose the complete fiat joke that exists. Gold is still grossly undervalued.
Correct. And the reason that they do that is because they don't want an exodus from the systems they control. And gold is a system where the vast majority is owned by the same elites. Let's face it. It's owned by central banks and it's owned by incredibly wealthy people. And a small percentage of it is for everyone else that's got their little coin or held it in custody in Singapore or somewhere. So they own the most of it. That's the one thing that never changes, and it's the same with Bitcoin. Wealth inequality never changes. that never changes. The distribution of wealth is always disproportionately consolidated in the hands of a few. And Bitcoin doesn't change that. Like, there are incredibly wealthy Bitcoiners, and then there's everyone else that owns a bit of Bitcoin. And that's the same with gold. And that's the same with everything, because that's a human psychology thing, market manipulation thing, all sorts of stuff that's involved in that. There's never been anything that changes that, apart from an ideological communist belief, maybe.
Do you think also, like, tell me if I'm wrong, right? I think an element of it is there are some really hardworking entrepreneurial people, really work hard, build a business. Someone comes along, gives them 100 million for it. They've made money. That's there'll be someone who's smart like you, who saw some potential in Bitcoin, invested early, not very much money, and now suddenly it's worth a lot. I mean, you've not done anything criminal, you've not done anything wrong, you've never taken advantage of anybody. You're just smart, lucky, at the right place at the right time. So there's some people who get rich that way. Is it fair to also say, though, that it's also very easy to make money when you have money, and also a lot of money is made through corrupt means because you have the money, you buy influence, you write the legislation, you write the policies, you pay for the contractors, you can grease the wheels, and because you're ruthless, because you're not like most of the people, you're maybe a bit of a psychopath. You don't mind treading on other people and walking all over them if it means that you're going to make money. And there's that ruthless desire to make money. And someone sat opposite me, Mike Driver, he said he did lots of business with billionaires, and he said they're not like other human beings. They're cold. They, like, if you got 100 million tomorrow, what would you do? I'd be like, man, I'm retired. I'd be like having a freaking great time in some farm somewhere. He went, yeah, you just retire and live your life and be happy. He's not a billionaire. Billionaire isn't happy until they own everything.
Okay. I think there's everything you just said is true. With the exception that it's a bit more sinister than that.
What?
It's more systemic.
What do you mean?
Wealth is created where you are forced into the very same actions that make you that person. So I'll give you an example. You start as somebody that has a good idea, and you think, I want to create this, and it requires investment. So then you go to a bunch of your friends and your family, and you say, oh man, am I really going to get my mom to invest in this? I don't want to put the life savings of, I feel guilty if this all goes wrong, I'm going to ruin my mom's life. And so you try and find a few people that you think could put some money in and give you some investment, and you give them some shares in your company. Okay. So now they have a stake in what you do. You have to change what you do in order to meet the desire of those that you secured funding from. Then maybe you create something great and they're all happy. And they say, right, we need more capital. So we need to compete with those that have massive capital. How am I going to compete with them? So now you're in the venture capital Silicon Valley game. And so now you're going out to institutional investors, and you're trying to make your company into a product that they can purchase. And then you realize, okay, there's all these different things that I have to do. So I have to get much, much better with my accounting and financial reporting. They're going to ask me, what if you die? So now I need a board and a team. They're going to ask all these different things. And so suddenly you turn yourself into a company that can secure Silicon Valley funding or venture capital funding. So now your mission is very different, and you answer to many different people. Now what do? Now you really succeed. Like, let's say you're really succeeding. Then the venture capitalists have significant rights over what you do. And in order to get the next gateway drug, they need you to take on some debt. And so what they'll say to you, what assets do you have? And if you've got assets, they'll say, right, why don't you put those assets in JP Morgan in custody, those shares, and then we'll issue you a loan against it so you don't need to sell more shares. And so, okay, all right, I'll put a chunk of my shares and a chunk of my assets over there, and they'll lend me a bunch of money. Now,
by the way, at this point, I feel like someone's got me by the balls.
You've got it. So now you're owned by the early investors.
Yeah.
But they were dumb and didn't have much rights. They didn't put the devil's contract in place.
Yeah.
But now you're owned by the venture capitalists, and they made it where they squeeze all the early investors. They've got superior rights because they're sophisticated, and they put the lawyers to it. And now you've taken your stock and you've borrowed against it. So now you have to pay that interest. And if you don't pay that interest, what happens? They take your shares. And so they can now say, I've got an idea. Why don't we put you on the stock market? Why don't we, you'd like to be able to sell some shares. Your mom would like to sell a few of her shares. Why don't we put you on the stock market? And so now you have to go through a very sophisticated process of turning your company into a product that can be bought and sold by anybody. Okay. And that means that you have to comply with every single requirement. And the venture capitalists that introduce you to the investment bank, they want the best terms. They've got their strategy figured out. The investment bank is going to the bank that borrows and said, right, how are we going to lever this up further? So all I'm saying is that these are tools of control. Right. Now let's say you're on the stock market and you create something really significant. You create something that is so significant that the government sees you as geopolitically and geostrategically. Now, who is the government? The government is a proxy for real power because the government's owned by the lobbies. So who contributes the most to each politician? Well,
APAC,
it is very power. It is real power.
APAC, big pharma, banking, military-industrial complex, you name it. There's so many lobbies.
You look at the top of the lobby, you see the top insurers. Why are they so high? Because they're managing a whole benefit system and put it into the asset managers. You've got military industrial complex, financial industrial complex, the technical industrial complex, big pharma. All right, so those are all the people that are paying for all the education system, all of the governments. And you know that financial industrial complex? They also own the Federal Reserve. They're the shareholders in the Fed. What is the Fed? The Fed is a shareholder in the Bank for International Settlements. What's the Bank for International Settlements? It's the central bank of central banks. So they create the policy that allows the banks to print the money. Now, when they printed the money, what did they do with that money? Well, Silicon Valley said, hey, by the way, I want to create this venture capital fund. Can I borrow at the lowest interest possible and invest in high growth equity? So they're in debt. The venture capitalists are also in debt. They look like these mega gazillionaires. The entrepreneurs look like these mega bazillionaires. But they're all, when you go through the cycle, they are all wrapped and entangled into the financial industrial complex. Now, who are the financial industrial complex? It's a network of banks that create the dollar, investment banks that create the stocks and bonds, venture capitalists that that turn every company into a product of this system, and then private equity that leverages and makes it where they can control your company. So if they crash the share price, your personal wealth means that your stocks get margin called, which means they take your stocks because you can't pay your debt. And so now what do? They create a way of manipulating that share price called a derivative.
I know.
And so now you've got this whole complex that is a mechanism for subordination. Now, what do you need to do when you're getting real high level now? Real high level. You need Pentagon budget. You need the money printing of the government. You know, how do you get that? Well, that's all distributed via the military industrial complex. Who does the military industrial complex? Well, they control the deep state. What's the deep state? That's the CIA, that's Mossad, that's MI6. That's the covert wars and operations. That's the blackmail rings. That's the human trafficking, sex trafficking, weapons trafficking, drugs trafficking, Black Sea, you know, all of the operations that we think are created by these massive cartels that are actually co-opted into this private network that controls the government.
Or Ahmed al-Balani. Yeah, it's all made by the deep industrial military intelligence apparatus.
Okay. Now, what else do? So they get to And we're going to bring all this back, but I think we're going on a natural path.
Yeah,
try and remember how to get back.
It's good. Just keep going.
Yeah. So now you've got these banks that create money. Now, they need to turn every person into a product. How do they do that? Student loans, credit cards, mortgages. So you need to buy into a system where wages don't catch up with the amount of money printing. What this means is that if they keep printing money, it creates inflation. And in order to get out of that inflation, you can't just save your cash because your cash is being debased. You need to speculate with it. You need to beat inflation. How are you going to beat inflation?
I struggled with this all my life, by the way.
Yeah.
What you've just described. Carry on.
Yeah. So everyone's saying, how do I beat inflation? Okay, well, one way to do that is to get a good job. How do I get a good job? Okay, I go do some education. Now I've got to take on student loan. I supplement it through credit cards. And immediately after that, you're keeping up with the Joneses. And so you're like, right, I've got a really good job now. Now I've got this job, I can buy a house. And so now you become a permanent product of the bank. And if you leverage up enough, and this is the leverage, you may be able to beat that inflation. And so people use their house as a piggy bank. And what do they do as they start to pay off their mortgage? They start to get closer and closer to owning their house, closer and closer over 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, depending on what they did. And then you borrow against it again. And they offer you lower rates at a 50-year mortgage or various other things. So you become a permanent product, right? So who are the people that actually get to beat inflation? Well, they're the ones that are climbing up the network. They're the compromised ones. Why? What do they get?
Bingo.
What do they get? They get 0% money. The most corrupt money in the world is quantitative easing, right? You get the government, you essentially get the banks to buy the government's debt, and then central banks put it on their balance sheet. So this is just pure corruption. This is below interest money. What about the banks? They get to create it for free. They actually get to create it. They get 1,000x on you're paying 10%. They get to lever that up 100 times. They get 1,000%. And remember, this is all a debt-based Ponzi scheme. The money to pay the interest doesn't exist. So you've got to find another person to take on the debt. You're either, if you have a positive money in your bank balance, it's because somebody else is in debt. The money doesn't exist unless somebody else is in debt. And the money to pay the interest doesn't exist. So we create this economic environment where your money is continually being debased, and then you need to speculate in order to beat inflation. Now, if you do a bit of speculation and you just invest some of your money in stocks, what happens? You're suddenly like, I don't know what stock to buy. I'm not a professional trader. So there's a company out there, BlackRock, that will just buy all the stocks for me, and I just can give them £100 a month or something. And now I don't need to figure out what stock to buy. Okay. So now BlackRock is taking everyone's investment money that can't be bothered to figure out what stock through ETFs and index funds. Then they're taking everyone's pension. Then they're taking everyone's insurance contributions because you're trying to hedge some of the risk. And then when you get your house, you have to have insurance. And so where did BlackRock and all the asset managers in this financial industrial complex get all the money? It's your money. You paid for it. So then what they do? Well, the banks create all of these, they create new money every time they issue a mortgage. And then they say, do you know what? I don't even want to take the risk of these mortgages anymore. Can I just package it up and give it to someone else? So Larry Fink says, yeah, I've got all this money. All these people are putting these pension money in. Why don't we create something called a mortgage-backed security? Let's package up all of these mortgages. Just put them into one product. And then what I can do is we can slap a credit rating on it. And if everyone complies, then they get this credit rating. Credit rating is about compliance with the network. So now you've got all the banks are creating the money, and then they create these mortgage-backed securities that allows them to control effectively all the real estate and transfer it. But who do they sell it to? They sell it to you. And so they created the money, they created the mortgage-backed security, and then they sold it to your pension. So you paid for the very system for them to get the 0% money in the first place. And they're charging a fee for it. And what else do they get? They get a board seat on every company. They get to voting rights. So when you bought a share, it came with the right to a dividend and the right to any growth and a voting right in the company. But you said, I don't want to buy the shares. I want BlackRock to buy them for me. So BlackRock takes your voting right. This is why they want to custody everything. This is why they want you will own nothing and be happy, right? So they now get all of the voting rights and all of the board seats. So if you want access to my money, you need to comply with this ESG score. All right. So now we can change access to capital. What else does BlackRock do? They said, with all of this data we've got, we're now managing $12 trillion of other people's money. And we own the banks. We took the banks public. We took all the asset managers public. We took the hedge funds public. We took the exchanges public. We've got a board seat on all of them. And the more and more companies we can take public, the more and more board seats we can get. And we have the capital. So we can fire off to JP Morgan, and JP Morgan can create derivatives and hedge funds, and they can manipulate the price. So if we want Elon to do what we need to do, what do we need to do? We need to get him in debt. How do we get him in debt? Why don't you
buy X for 40 billion?
Yeah, why don't you buy X for 40 billion? We'll contact some of our buddies in the sovereign wealth funds that are benefiting from the petrodollar.
Qatar and God knows what, yeah.
Yeah, they'll put some money up, they'll provide the collateral, and you just put your stocks up. Now you put your stocks up and we'll lend you the money to buy it. Okay, so now Elon is a debt slave and they control his share price. And they can decide why. They control the media. They turned all the media companies into public companies as well. And then through the deep state and various other operations, you can control the alternative media. Now you control the algorithms. Let's invest in this technical industrial complex. Let's create Facebook. How do we get the budgets? Well, let's take the thing that the government created. Let's hand it over to one of these entrepreneurs. So Elon, you're going to get SpaceX. Now you get to be a spaceship scientist.
Yeah, because they all get the government contracts.
Yeah. And in order to climb this network, you have to be complicit to the financial industrial complex. So just like through algorithms, if you say the right thing, you get the right traffic, and that changes what you say. And suddenly you become more stupid and sensationalist. And you say, the banks are about to crash like crazy. And suddenly you get all the traffic. Now, if you're saying something that's quite nuanced and intelligent, you're kind of falling down the algorithm.
Yeah.
And so they're able to do this. So you got to think about this whole thing as one massive control grid. And so you think he's evil. Well, no, what happens next when you're Elon? Well, you get a knock on the door from Jeffrey Epstein and they take a photo with you. And if you just happen to be psychopathic and addicted to drugs and all sorts of shit, that you're ridiculous enough or psychopathic or twisted enough to have sex with an underage girl, then you're allowed to climb up the network further.
If you want to hear the rest of this conversation and join our private supporter community, the link is in the show notes. Remember, folks, your support keeps this work free, independent and alive, simply for the cost of one coffee a month. All right, folks, thank you so much. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and/or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.